So today we're going to go ahead and take a look at the different theories of emotion. Now, if we were in class right now, we would start with a little experiment. So I want to explain what the experiment is because this is always how we would begin explaining how emotions work. And so what we would do in class is we would have divided the class in two, and half of you would have taken a pen or a pencil and you would have held it between your nose and your upper lip like that, and the other half would hold their pen or pencil between their teeth like that. And then I would go through and I would share a series of pictures, jokes, some of the best on the internet. Not really, they're supposed to be kind of middle of the road kind of jokes here. And as you would hold your pen, either between your nose and upper lip or between your teeth, you would rank each picture in terms of how funny you think they are. And then at the end of taking a look at a series of just hysterical jokes, we would see what your average humor rating would be. And then we would try and see if there's a difference between the two groups. And so that's the big question. Why would we have half the class hold their pen up here, and why would we have half the class hold their pen between their teeth? What are we looking at there? And maybe some of you have figured it out. Maybe some of you are still like, I have no idea. But what we're doing is we are changing the muscles in your face. So if you hold your pen between your nose and your upper lip, it sort of simulates a frown, right? And if you hold your pen between your teeth, it simulates a smile. And the question is, what comes first when it comes to emotions? Can you change your facial muscles to change your emotions? Does the physical response happen because of a cognitive emotional response? Or does the cognitive emotional response come from the physical reaction that we're having? So how do emotions really work? And the textbook breaks down the different theories of emotion that we're going to take a look at here. And the first one is the James Lange theory. And so what James Lange says is that the physical response happens before we experience the emotion itself, right? So say you're driving at night and you see a car coming straight towards you. The first thing that happens is your heart starts pounding really fast. And then that leads you to feel the emotion of fear. So one follows the other. I like to think of it like James Lange theory. J comes before L. The arousal comes before the emotion, right? A different theory says that it is not happening one after another, but they're happening simultaneously. So Cannon-Bard theory suggests that if we see an oncoming car coming towards us, that the arousal, our heart pounding, and the emotion of fear are happening at the exact same time. So there's no delay, there's no waiting for one to lead to the next. It's just our emotions and our fears are connected. That as we're experiencing one, we're going to be experiencing the other at the same time. And then the third is Schachter's two-factor, or the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory. And this one says that we need to first label the emotion. So like James Lange, the arousal comes before the emotion, but here we have to differentiate between the arousal response that we have. Because your heart could be pounding because you're afraid, or your heart could be pounding because you're excited, right? So what am I feeling? Am I feeling terror that a car's coming towards me, or am I feeling excited that a car's coming towards me? Obviously, that would lead us to feel fear. And so it's our physiology plus our cognition, maybe our perception, our memories, our interpretations, right, of the event that lead us to together create the emotion that we're going to feel. And then there's this additional theory that is called Richard Lazarus's cognitive appraisal theory of emotion. And this is saying that it's not the arousal, as in Schachter-Singer's theory, that we have to label. He says that it is the event itself. And this can help us to explain why two people would have different emotional responses to the same event. let's say like a test. Why is one person really calm and one person really anxious going into that test? Might come down to that person's cognitive appraisal. So he says that when we look at an event, we have to decide, is that event relevant or irrelevant to us? Is it important or unimportant? And if it's really important, then the emotion and the arousal that we might have might be a little bit higher. If it's not as important to us, then maybe our arousal and our emotion is going to be a little more muted. And so it's really going to vary on the individual based on their goals, based on their appraisal of the event, based on their beliefs that really lead to sort of a simultaneous reaction here, like Cannon Bard, to the arousal and the emotion that we feel. But first, what we have to do is interpret the event itself. How important is this to us? What is our outcome going to be? Why do we care about it so much, right? Those are the questions that we have that will then lead us to feeling the different emotions. Some other things that the textbook mentions that are sort of important in noting when it comes to emotion is that sometimes cognition doesn't need to precede emotion. This is a really interesting theory and research done by Joseph Ledoux or Ledoux, I think it is, on what we call the sightless fear response. And an easy way to think about this is if you've ever seen something out of the corner of your eye, maybe like something on the ground moving, or maybe something, a little speck on the wall, and you immediately think like it's a spider, right? And maybe before you're even consciously aware of what you see, you sort of jump and you look, and then once you have a chance to really see what it is you're looking at, you realize like, oh, it's a speck of dust, and then you calm down and you relax. And what we're finding is the way that the brain works, right? Information that we see comes in through our eyes to our thalamus, and then our thalamus will send it to our occipital lobe, our association areas, and also to our emotional center, our amygdala. What they're finding is that there's actually a two-routing system coming from our thalamus. So as we see something, as that information is being sent to our occipital lobe, where we register what we see, that's already being sent to our amygdala. So we can feel the emotion before we fully registered what it is that we've seen. And they've actually done research on this with rats, where they actually damage their temporal lobes, so they can't consciously acknowledge that they can hear. Their ears still work. So the information, they'll make loud noises to startle them. That'll go into their thalamus. It'll get sent to their temporal lobe, but it's damaged, so it won't do anything. They can't actually hear it, but it will also go to their amygdala. So even though these rats are essentially deaf, they still have a fear response to a loud sound, which shows that our brain sort of does this dual process of sending information to our kind of cognitive conscious part of our brain and our emotional part of our brain at the same time. So that's why we call this conditioned, or this maybe sightless fear response that we have, because there are two pathways that are taking place in our brain at the exact same time. One to our occipital lobe, our auditory cortex, to our kind of conscious awareness, and then the other part goes straight to our limbic system, to our hypothalamus, to our amygdala. Could set off the fight or flight response, could set off those emotional responses that we have as well. So that's kind of a cool piece of research that we have found when it comes to how we experience emotions physically. Next time, we're going to talk about how our faces do respond to emotions, how we can learn to identify emotions, and also the differences in the way that we express emotions on our face. So that is what we will look at next time. But for now, we will leave you there with the physiology of emotions.